said that. That was all him, okay? So I've never said that. But good morning. Good morning. How's everybody doing this morning? All right, come on. We are in the house of the Lord today. We got to be excited. How's everybody doing this morning? Awesome, awesome. I got like all this extra space up here, so I don't know what's going to happen. I might jump down. I don't know. So you guys got to stay on your toes. Who knows what's going to happen today. But I'm so excited about this message that I'm able to bring today, and I'm really excited about it. And so we've been going through this series called Faithbook, and it's kind of purposely a play on words for Facebook, and we've been talking about social media and the impact social media has on us and how we really should turn to the faith book, which is the Bible, instead of rather than going on social media and picking off what they're saying there. And so talking about Faithbook, and a couple weeks ago, Pastor Jeff led us off with a great message, really bringing that contrast of what the difference between social media culture and what they're bringing versus what the Bible is saying. And he really talked about how it's almost always opposite, right? It's almost always opposite. What the world tells us, what social media tells us, is almost opposite of what God tells us. And it was just a great message. And then last week, Pastor Mike gave an absolutely great message on marriage. If you guys didn't get to see that one, or even Pastor Jeff's message, I encourage you guys to go online. You go to lifecoast.org/messages, and those are up there, and just watch those back again. But he gave a great message about marriage, and I'll share with the one quote that really stuck out to me is that at first, we really treasure the person that we're with. We do that naturally at first, but after a while, we have to be intentional about it. It's first is natural, but then we have to be intentional. So if you missed that message, there's the free golden takeaway I'll give you for that one right there. But attraction starts and the treasuring starts naturally, but then it's got to turn intentionally. And so that's something I want to do in my marriage as a young married man. And so I was really just excited that he was able to do that. And so today, my message is called Unfriend. It's called Unfriend. And so again, staying in the Facebook theme, unfriending. And so nowadays, it's a lot different. Back in the day, unfriending used to be really hard, right? You used to have to actually maybe go to someone's house, slam a door in their face or something, or hang up a phone. I mean, the 90s were great because you could actually slam the phone down. Like, you actually got to do that. Now it's just like a little click on your touch phone. It doesn't have the same effect anymore, You can't get your anger out in just a little soft touch. They don't hear it, The best is when you slammed it down in the 90s and it fell off the counter and it just went everywhere. It didn't actually hang up. They're still on the line because you didn't push the button down all the way. Oh, man, we need to bring back the 90s. That's what we need to do. I'm just kidding. But anyway, it used to be a lot more difficult than now. It's really easy to show our offense with someone. When we get upset, we can just simply unfriend them on Facebook, right? It's a simple little click. That's all you need to do is click unfriend. Or maybe you're not that aggressive. You just do the unfollow so you don't see anything, but you're not that aggressive that you want to unfriend someone because you're a Christian, and you're nice enough. You don't want them to know you unfriended them, but you're not really looking at anything they're posting, right? We've all been there. We've all done that. And so it reminds me of a story back in the 90s. It's a great time, maybe early 2000s. But I was about 8 years old, and I was Dakota, who's sitting up front, is one of my best friends, and we've been best friends for a really long time. But if I'm being honest, growing up, Coda and I were actually more like best frenemies, okay? And so we were really close friends, but the issue that we had is we had the exact same type of personality, all right? We liked to be the center of attention, okay? We thought everyone was there for us, and we wanted to be the funny person, right? And so anytime the other person usurped that, it was just not good. It was just different fights would happen, different things. And so I remember this one time I was about 8 years old, and I'm spending the night at Dakota's house, and we're hanging out. We're doing Legos, okay, OG, Legos where it's at. And we're doing Legos, and I don't remember the exact fight, but I remember we got so mad, or at least I got so mad, that I told him to his face, I said, "I don't want to be your friend anymore." He ran out of the room, went crying to his mom, and I hid under his bed. So that's how bold I was, stand up. I don't want to be your friend anymore. It was really, she's not here to defend herself, so I feel bad, but I was scared of Holly, okay? Holly was that mom who I was slightly scared of, if I'm being honest. Holly, I love you. If you're watching later, you're awesome. You're amazing. But I was a little scared of Holly, so I was less scared of Dakota, and I was more scared of Holly at that point. And so I hid under the bed, and I think it was Dylan and Code had bunk beds at the time, so I might have been hiding under Dylan's bed. I don't know what was going on. But I hid under his bed, and then Holly came in, and, she sat us both down and was like, you guys can't not be friends. You guys have been friends since birth, and you guys already have an 8-year friendship at 8 years old, so you guys have to be friends. You guys have to work through this. And so we eventually got over it, but I just remember that's what it used to be like, and to unfriend someone. And I tried to, and sorry, Coda, it didn't work out, so you're stuck with me. We're going to be friends forever, so you're lost, but it's okay. But whatever. We used to actually fight in height, and then if you guys see him now, we don't fight in height anymore. He's just way taller than me, so he won that battle. But anyway, so that's what unfriending used to look like, right? And so many of us, again, Facebook, it's the easy way to unfriend, but we still do that nowadays, right? Maybe at work, you purposely take a lunch that's at a different time than someone else, right? You don't take the same lunch that they do, or you don't sit at the same lunch table. Maybe you're a student and you avoid their lunch table. You're like, I'm not sitting next to them, or you try to take a different lunch period or something like that. You do different things to get away from them. You avoid them. You don't call them. You avoid their street. How many of you guys have that type of dispute with someone? You just don't even go down their street. I don't want to think that they're there. I don't even want to think about it and do that. And then I know this doesn't happen here, but it could, is that, you go to the same church, but you sit on different sides of the auditorium, right? Maybe that even happens, is that you love God, so you want to come to the same church, but you actually sit on different sides of the auditorium. Or maybe even this, maybe you decided you want to go to Parkview, right? Maybe that's what you want to do. You go to PC3, you go to First Baptist Palm Coast, and those are all great churches. And just so you guys know, if you're thinking about it, we got spies over there, so we'll know. We're really good friends with Pastor Greg and Pastor Kevin and Pastor Billy. And so we connect. We're like, hey, what life coaches did you have at your church this week? And they do the same thing. Which Parkviewers do you guys have? And so if you're visiting from Parkview, hi, how are you? Great to have you. We'll just let Pastor Greg know later. But it's good to have you here. We're excited. And so, so we're talking about social media, talking about unfriending, and so we're in this culture, and we're doing this. And so Pastor Jeff gave me, he didn't really give me this message. I kind of asked for it, and I've realized that I've asked for conflict-oriented messages the last few times I've preached, so I don't know if that's something God's doing in me or whatever, or maybe Pastor Jeff just knows I need it. So working on it. But so I see my view on social media. Luckily, I get to follow most of you on social media, and so I watch all what you're doing, so maybe now you'll think differently when you post, maybe not. But I get to follow a lot on social media, and what we've seen in today's culture is that nowadays, people are so much more bold than they've ever been before, right? They're so much more bold because they're hiding behind a keyboard and a screen, right? There's people who go on Facebook and they say things that they would never, ever, ever say to your face, but they type it, right? They go ahead and do that. They go in your comment section on your Facebook. You get that notification. You're like, oh, my gosh. This person, unbelievable, right? You go ahead and post this. Or maybe you see something nowadays, because we get our news from social media, which is probably not a good idea, by the way, if that's where you get your news. Probably not a good idea. But most of us do that. We find our news via social media. And the news nowadays, because we're on such a global scale, you don't just see your local news anymore. You see national news. You see global news. You see everything that's going on all the time. We're so interconnected now that there's so many more things to get offended about, right? There's so many more things that are offensive because we see it a lot more. We used to just be able to hang out with our 5 close friends in our little neighborhood and our little cul-de-sac with our picket fence, and we were safe. But now with social media, everybody's out there all the time, right? And you guys know some people are out there, right? They're out there. But they're out there all the time, and they're posting. They're doing all this kind of stuff. And so we see all these things on Facebook. And again, I see you guys on Facebook. I see a lot of other friends, whether Christian or non-Christian friends on Facebook. But probably the biggest thing I see on Facebook is that people get so offended so easily, right? They get so offended so easily. And so I'm trying to figure out, I'm like, God, why do we get so offended on social media? Why does this bother us so much, right? And so where does this coming from? Sometimes people just lash out. Like the nicest people you've ever met turn into sailors online. You're like, I didn't know you knew that word. Like, I can't believe you typed that. Why isn't Facebook blocking that? It's unbelievable. But they go on all these things, and we get so offended. And so I was talking to God and trying to figure out, why do we get so offended? Why does Facebook seem so polarizing? If you've ever been on Facebook, there seems to be a clear, again, I'm not going to use left and right because that's too political. We'll just use, side A and side B, right? There's always sides, right? It doesn't matter where you are on Facebook. It's really hard to not fall into side A or to side B. There's always seems to be people pulling you in different directions and doing that kind of stuff, and we're always getting pulled. And side A, from B's perspective, side A is always wrong, and from side A perspective, side B is always wrong, and you're always right. That's all that matters, right? On Facebook, you're always right. It doesn't matter what everybody else is. You're always right. And so I've been seeing this, and I'm like, God, why do we do this? Why do we get offended? And so here's what I felt like God spoke to me, is that we got to a point that we act out on social media because we're coming from a place of bitterness. We're coming from a place of bitterness. And there's something in us that when someone posts it, nowadays the word is triggered, right? If you guys have been on social media, there's something that triggers you. And all of a sudden, if we did a cartoon thing, my head would explode. There'd be a nuclear explosion coming out, right? We get triggered and something happens. Someone says a specific word. Someone says a specific name. Someone drops something like that, and all of a sudden, it's just over, right? And so what I feel like God's telling me is that we're coming from a place of bitterness, and we have this bitterness that we don't really understand, and we're acting out of this bitterness. And the good thing is that God, everything's in the Bible, everything's in the Faithbook where we can find on how to handle things. And so God gives us a great illustration of someone who we esteem very highly acting out in bitterness. And so we're going to take a look at that. So we're going to take a look at Acts chapter 15, verses 36 through 41. And so verse 36 says, sometime later, Paul said to Barnabas, let us go back and visit the believers in all the towns who were preached the word of the Lord and see how they were doing. Barnabas wanted to take John, also called Mark, with them. But Paul did not think it was wise because he had deserted them in Pamphylia. I can't pronounce those words yet. I'm working on it, okay? And had not continued with them in the work. They had such a sharp disagreement that they parted company. Barnabas took Mark and sailed to Cyprus, but Paul chose Silas and left. And commended by the believers in the grace of the Lord, he went to Syria, Sicilia, and strengthened of the churches, okay? And so here's a little bit of background to this. So something we love to do at Life Coast is give you context, okay? So we don't want to just take a verse and just say, hey, we're going to preach off this verse. We want to give you context. So here's what's going on, okay? So Paul and Barnabas are like the all-time bros, okay? One of the original bromances that happened in the Bible, okay? So these guys are, they do life together. They do everything. So they've literally just finished a 2.5, 3-year missionary journey where they've gone to all these different cities and they preached the word, right? So they spent 2 to 3 years together preaching the word, getting thrown in jail, getting beat, all this kind of stuff, So kind of like, me and Dakota, we just beat each other up and all that kind of stuff, right? So we have those types of relationships. But these guys were in it together, okay? And so they were really, really close over the last 3 years. And let's step even further back. Is that we know the story of Saul, who became Paul, right? He got converted on the road to Damascus and got to that point and became saved. But who was he like before Saul, right? He was a murderer, if we're being real, right? He murdered Christians. He threw Christians in jail. A little side note, if you don't remember, but he actually held the coats of those who stoned Stephen, the first martyr. So Paul was not a good dude. Paul was not someone for a while when he was Saul, was not someone you wanted to be around if you were a believer, right? You did not want to do this. And so he had this miraculous transformation in his life, which is fantastic. But if we're being honest, if someone told me, hey, you remember that guy Saul? Yeah, you remember how he tried to kill us and throw us in jail? And, he was there when Stephen died. Stephen, that guy. Yeah, he was there when he died. And, but yeah, apparently he met Jesus, and he wants to join our team now. I'd be like, no. Not feeling it. I think he's a spy. I think he's a liar. He's going to try to tear us apart from within, right? And so Barnabas, who's not an official apostle, but he likes to hang out with the apostles because he's a really cool guy, he actually goes to the other apostles. He goes to Peter, James, John, and talks to them. He's like, guys, I know who Saul was. But let me tell you, he's Paul now. Name change, big deal, okay? And so now he's this really good guy, and we need him on our team. And so Barnabas literally vouched for Paul to actually do everything that we read about in the New Testament. Without Barnabas, Paul wouldn't have written all these letters, or maybe he would have, we just wouldn't have cared. Paul may not have got the blessing to go out and preach all these churches. He might have done it anyway, but we wouldn't have cared. And so Barnabas, honestly, we give Paul a lot of credit for writing 2/3 of the New Testament, but it's really Barnabas. Barnabas gets credit for that because he vouched for Paul at that point. And so imagine this. Let's go back into the passage and get back to where we are, is that they've just spent 3 years together doing missionary work. Barnabas literally vouched for Paul to do everything that Paul has done and what he's going to do. These guys were bros. They were tighter than anybody else, and they were really, really close. And there was some disagreement that happened that was, it's just so sharp. It uses that specific word. It was so sharp that it split them up. So sharp that it split them up. Man, that had to be really a big deal, okay? If the person who vouched for you did something and you didn't, and you disagreed with them so much, you went your separate ways. That would be crazy. That would be crazy to happen. So why is this happening? And so the Bible gives us a little bit more insight, very little insight, so I'll just reference it for you. It's not even put up on the screen, but it's from Acts chapter 12. And so when Paul and Barnabas leave on their first missionary journey, they actually take John Mark, who, side note, wrote the Gospel of Mark, by the way, and they actually go with him on their first journey. And when they land at their first city in Pamphylia that we read in 15, John Mark, for some reason, doesn't continue with them. And it's very kind of short. It doesn't give a lot of description, so there's a little bit up for speculation there. But it just says John Mark did not continue with them as they went on to their missionary journey. So, Acts 12, John Mark abandons Paul and Barnabas. Acts 15, Paul and Barnabas are going to go do the exact same thing that they were going to do the first time, right? They're going to go back to the same cities. They were taking the same trip and go preach to the same cities. And Barnabas wanted to take John Mark again. And Paul was so bitter about that abandonment that happened back in Acts chapter 12. He was so bitter, he was so hurt that he could not oversee that. He could not oversee that abandonment. And here's the thing. I was talking to Pastor Jeff, and he helped me pull this out, and it was really great. But Paul could not see that Barnabas was trying to do for Mark that Barnabas already did for Paul. Did you get that? Did you get that? Barnabas was trying to do for Mark what Barnabas already did for Paul, but Paul was so bitter that he could not see that, hey, I'm doing the same thing I did for you. Remember when you were a murderer? Remember when you were that guy and I stood up for you? I'm doing the same thing for Mark. And Paul could not see that. His bitterness had held him so much that he could not see through that. He could not see past it. Okay, so this is obviously an example of what not to do, right? What not to do, how to not handle bitterness. Okay, so what do we do? And so what I kind of came up with, this probably isn't original, but it's a cycle of bitterness and kind of what leads us into the cycle of bitterness. So how did Paul get there, okay? So the first thing in the cycle of bitterness is unmet expectations. So if you're taking notes, fill that in your blanks. Go ahead and do that. But unmet expectations lead to bitterness. So Paul had this expectation in Acts chapter 12 that John Mark was going to continue with them through the journey, was going to be in it through all. And that expectation was not met. And so that turned to bitterness, right? It turned to bitterness. After bitterness, the next cycle, okay, is bitterness leads to anger. Bitterness leads to anger. We hear the word bitterness, and we kind of take it as kind of a little thing. You know, we've all had the bitter coffee, or we've had sauerkraut or something, and it's just bitter, and we don't like it. But it's really not that big of a deal. But the thing about bitterness is it leads to anger. Right? It leads to anger, and we get upset, and we get emotional, right? Bitterness isn't a huge, strong emotion, but anger is, and it leads us to anger. And the last thing is anger leads to unforgiveness. Anger leads to unforgiveness. And so Paul had let this bitterness well up so much that it turned into anger, and anger turned into unforgiveness. Okay, I'm going to geek out for a second. Is that okay with you guys? Kind of geek out. So when I was coming up with this thing, I could only think of Yoda. I know it's weird. I'm sorry. But I could think of Yoda, and I think of back in episode 1, which is not a good movie, but it's okay. But he has this quote in it, right? And he's talking to Anakin, and Anakin is a new Padawan at this time, and Anakin is standing afraid. And he says to Anakin, this pathway, he says, fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, and hate leads to the dark side. So if you guys didn't think Star Wars is biblical, it is, okay? It's working on it, all right? We can take anything, even Jar Jar Binks, and we can take it and make it holy for him. It's going to be good. It's a tough one, but we'll do it. We'll work on it, okay? We'll work on it. All right. Justice for Jar Jar Binks, hashtag. We're going to start that. So this is what happens. It becomes a cycle, and I say cycle because it goes over and over and over again. And so once you have this seed of unforgiveness inside of you, it just cycles into the next thing because now you have more expectations that aren't getting met. And now you have more bitterness. And now you have more anger. And now you have more unforgiveness. And this is just festering inside of you. And so this is what was happening to Paul in Acts chapter 15. Okay? So what I want to make a side note right here is, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but a side note, okay? If you are experiencing bitterness in your heart, if you're experiencing unforgiveness, anger, bitterness, I want to encourage you, go see Pastor Josh over at CR or at Clarity, or go see Tracy at Clarity, and find what that is. If you can't identify it right now, what that bitterness is in you, go talk to them. They'd love to help you find it, okay? That's what they love to do because they want to help you get better. And so I just want to make that a side note right now, okay? And so here's the thing that we're going to get to, and so we're going to kind of get to the solution now at this point. And so the reason why we get so upset on Facebook, the reason why we get so upset on social media, again, the root of it is unmet expectations. Unmet expectations. And so we're stuck in this area where people aren't meeting our expectations, or we're getting really, really upset, okay? And so I was talking to God and reading this book, and it's called Unoffendable. Really great book. I definitely recommend it if you want to read it sometime. And it had this really great quote in it, and I want to share it with you guys. I think it's going to change your life, so feel free to write this down, okay? But to have a more happy life, to have more excitement in your life, the thing you need to do, this is going to sound weird, is lower your expectations. Did a pastor really just say that on stage? Lower your expectations? Aren't you supposed to say raise your expectations? Aren't you supposed to say all these kind of stuff? Well, here's what I mean. Here's a little bit of background to it, okay? Unfortunately, on social media and what we see in culture is we come from a wrong worldview. We come from an improper worldview, okay? Worldview, really easy, is how you view the world, okay? Easy enough, right? And so we as believers, we should understand that the world has been going down since Genesis chapter 3, right? Genesis chapter 1 and 2, it was all good in the hood. It was what was up. It was awesome. There was fruit and all this kind of awesome stuff. And then Genesis chapter 3, the fall happens, right? And what we need to understand is that ever since that day when the fall happened, the world has been going downhill, right? It's been going downhill. It's been trending downward ever since then, right? It's been going down. And we know that it'll eventually go up because Jesus is coming back, right? Jesus is coming back. That should be exciting, right? Okay, he's coming back, all right? But until that day, the world is not going to get better. The world is not going to get better until that day. And so what's happened in our society is, depending on what you want to do, you can take the scientific route and say evolution is the blame for this one, because evolution says everything is always getting better, right? We used to be primordial ooze, and now we walk and talk. That's awesome, okay? So if evolution was true, the world would be getting better, right? Or if we take the technology route and we see that, man, every 6 months they come out with a new iPhone that's better. Okay, everything is getting better because iPhones are getting better, all right? It's easy to see. If the iPhone X is better than the iPhone 6, then yeah, we're great, right? So everything is trending upward. And so that's what we see in this world is our culture has said we're trending upward. And so what that has done is it's raised our expectations upward. And so now we have this expectation, well, if my iPhone gets better, my spouse should get better. Gotcha, right? My friend should get better. My boss should get better. My job should get better because my iPhone got better, right? That's what should happen. But if we're being realistic, everything is going downhill since Genesis chapter 3, and it's not going to go uphill, and it's going to do a huge spike, which is going to be amazing when Jesus comes back. And so we've got to change our worldview and put the biblical lens on and say, man, this world, honestly, is going to crap. Okay? Everything in this world is going to burn. It's going down. But guess what? Jesus is coming back. There's going to be redemption. It's going to be awesome. But our expectations on the world need to be lowered. All right? So here's where it's going to get real. Right? It's going to get real. Lower your expectations in traffic. Everybody who has a license just laughed, okay? If you don't have a license yet, wait for it, okay? So guess what? Expect that person's going to cut you off. Expect it. So I see this probably worse than me when I drive because, honestly, I have the best expectations of my driving ability and everybody else's driving ability, right? I always assume I'm going to catch the green light. Always. I mean, why not, right? I always assume I'm going to catch the green light. I always assume that someone's going to use the directional before they move into my lane, right? I would always assume that. I would always assume that the flow of traffic on the left lane of the highway is going to be faster than the right lane of the highway, right? That's my expectation, is that people are going to do the right thing. But it's not true. It's not true. And so you have unmet expectations, and it turns into road rage. All right, how many people got a little bit of road rage in you? You love Jesus, but you got a little bit of road rage in you. Okay, we're working on something. All right, it's good. It's good, right? You have unmet expectations. So maybe this is in your job. Maybe you're due for a promotion. Maybe you're due for a raise, and you don't get it. Expect it. Expect that you're not going to get that raise. Expect that you're not going to get that promotion. Expect that if you're a teacher, your students aren't going to get you flowers. Expect that they're not going to be the best that they can possibly be. I know it sounds bad, but guess what? When we lower our expectations, something really cool happens. So it sounds really negative right now, but something really cool happens. When we lower our expectations, when something goes wrong, it becomes normal, and we don't talk about it. But if you guys realize that when something goes right, like you hit every green light at Palm Coast Parkway, which has never happened in the history of the world, but, maybe you are that one blessed and highly favored person, and if you were there, raise your hand, and I'm driving with you all the time. But you hit every green light, but when you hit every green light, no one's ever posted on Twitter, hey, I just hit every green light. Never happens, right? But guess what? When you hit every red light, everybody posts that. I just hit every red light in the history of the world, and it's awful. I hate Palm Coast, right? That's what we post on social media, right? Because we have an expectation that we're going to hit every green light. But guess what? If I had an expectation that I was going to hit every red light, and I showed up to a meeting, and I was like, guys, I only hit one red light. What if I did that at our next staff meeting? It'd be like, whoo, we only hit one red light. Isn't that awesome? Like, we'd be celebrating a lot more. So when we lower our expectations, the things that now cause us our unmet expectations, right, those don't happen anymore, so we don't mention it, right, because they're met. Our expectations are met, so we don't talk about it. But things that exceed our expectations, now we have the opportunity to celebrate those things. And so we get the opportunity to celebrate when someone did something amazing. When someone who, let's be honest, if you're the person who cut someone off, right, we've all been there, we've all done it. If you're the person who cut someone off and they don't honk your horn and ram in you and, chase you home and that kind of stuff, celebrate it. Be like, man, I cut someone off today and they didn't chase me. It's amazing. That's amazing that didn't happen, right? Because our expectation, we cut someone off, that's probably what we would be doing, right? Someone didn't give me the middle finger on my traffic drive this morning. Isn't that amazing? Thank you, Jesus. Someone didn't do that, right? We need to be celebrating those things. We are able to celebrate the little things. So when someone forgives you when you do something wrong, now we get to celebrate that. But when we expect forgiveness, we don't celebrate it. When we expect forgiveness, we don't celebrate it. But if we expect unforgiveness and we get forgiveness, now we have the opportunity to do it. Okay, so I'm going to break this down in points for us so we can get clear on it, okay? So the first thing we want to do is expect brokenness. In this world, we expect perfection because, right, we're perfect, right? We think we're perfect, so we expect everybody else to be like us. And so we expect perfection, but we need to expect brokenness. Again, this is in your notes, so if you want to write that down. But expect brokenness. Next one is find beauty. Find beauty. Find when someone exceeded your expectations. When someone did something nice for you that they shouldn't have done, celebrate that. Noonie, I'm going to celebrate you for a second. Valentine's Day, we have a staff meeting, and Noonie's not even coming to this meeting. She comes in and drops off a dozen heart-shaped donuts from Dunkin' Donuts. Noonie, thank you so much. That was awesome, right? That was not expected at all. And Pastor Mike was a little upset because he's trying to be on the low-carb, low-fat diet, and that's just not it. But I was happy. I was just like, all right, more for me, so it's fine, right? But we need to celebrate those kind of things. When someone's nice to you, when someone holds the door at an elevator for you, celebrate that, tweet that, Facebook post that, Instagram that. Do that kind of stuff. We need to find the beauty when someone does something nice. Next thing we need to do is embrace forgiveness. Because guess what? Even when you lower your expectations, you try to do it, we're not good at it. We all have expectations that we hold on to. And so when those expectations do get unmet, embrace forgiveness. Embrace forgiveness. Give grace to that person. Live out one of our values at Life Coast Church and understand that God has given you so much grace that it should be easy to forgive the person who cuts you off in traffic, the person who didn't hold the elevator for you, the person who, whatever, took your place in line, whatever. Embrace forgiveness. We need to do those things. So expect brokenness, find beauty, and embrace forgiveness. And so what I want to read is out of forgiveness, what we want to do is what we want to default to is that 1 Corinthians 13, 1 and 3. And it says, if I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, but I have faith that can move mountains, but I do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all that I possess to the poor or give over to my body in hardship that I may boast, but I do not have love, I gain nothing. So you could have everything going for you. You could have the most spiritual gifts you could possibly think of. You could have all these things going for you. But if you don't have love, and if that isn't manifested in embracing forgiveness, you have nothing. You have nothing. And so we need to embrace forgiveness. We need to embrace love. And what that does is the solution that it comes to is that when we do all three of those things, we become unoffendable. We become unoffendable. And so that should be our goal. So if you want to walk away with something today, that's what I want you to walk away with. Is our goal is to become unoffendable. Our goal is to not be hurt by things that we see. It's to not be hurt by the person who cuts us off in traffic or the person who takes our job or person who does that, or heck, if your kids get out of bed 14 times to get a glass of water, whatever. Your dog poops in his crate for the third time this week. It's okay. Expect it. They're a dog. It's going to happen, okay? Now, if it happened to me, Natalie would have a totally different situation if I was doing that. So, but expect that. Expect brokenness, find beauty, embrace forgiveness, and become unoffendable. And so that's where I want us to go. And so what I want us to do for the next few minutes is I want us to dream for a second. I want us to dream. What would the world look like if we became unoffendable? What would it look like? Think about that for a second. What would it look like if we became unoffendable? What would it look like? What if here's this, the devil loves division, right? He loves it. Jesus works in multiplication, but the devil works in division. If you didn't think that math class you took in high school was worth it, it's biblical too, okay? The devil works in division. And so on social media, we're on opposite sides. We're polarizing as a culture, right? You can be on the left or you can be on the right. You can be on all these different things. But it's polarizing. So what would it be? What would it be? I want to do an example, and I want to go back to my 1 Corinthians verse a little bit for just a second. But what happens is, I'm going to be real. Can I be real for a second, last few minutes? And so, unfortunately, this message is really timely, right? I say unfortunately because our culture is divided right now, right? And we had something really tragic that happened in our state just a little over a week ago. It was a school shooting here in Florida. 15 students lost their lives, right? Terrible. Heartbreaking. I'm going to be honest with you guys because I love you, but I saw so many people in our church, they pick sides. And so this tragic thing happens. And the first thing that I see they post, maybe they posted something different, but the first thing that I saw on my feed was they picked a side. They picked a side. And maybe you're on the right and you're a conservative, and the first thing you said is, we need more security. You need more guns in school. Well, that may be right, but guess what? If you didn't have heartbreak for the people that happened, for the victims that happened first, you're in the wrong. I'm just going to be real with you right now. You're in the wrong. And maybe you're on the left side of the political spectrum, and maybe you saw this as an opportunity that, man, we need stricter gun control. We need to do all this, and we need to do all that kind of stuff. If that was your first reaction, and your first reaction wasn't heartbreak for the students that lost their lives, you're wrong. So going back to the 1 Corinthians chapter 13 verse, it says that whatever we do, if we do it without love, we are like a clanging cymbal or a resounding gong. So here's what happens on social media. When a tragedy happens and an opportunity for Jesus to be injected in something, but we take that as an opportunity to push our agenda, our side. We pick sides. This is what it sounds like. More guns in school. Oh, oh, oh. That's what it sounds like. Maybe we're on the other side and we say, no, we don't want any guns. No guns. No guns. That's the sound it makes. It doesn't help anybody. It doesn't move anybody forward. And so when I go on Facebook, when I go on social media, if I'm being honest, that's all I see. That's all I hear. As I see a lot of clanging cymbals and gongs. And I don't see a lot of love, if I'm being honest. So what I want to challenge us to do, and Pastor Jeff mentioned this a little bit in the offering last week, and we showed a video about it in the rally last week. But I want to challenge us to stand in the middle. To stand in the middle. So Facebook and culture wants us to put us on the right and the left. But we need to stand in the middle. And we need to take a stand in the middle. And so here's some tips. Again, they're in your notes for you, but here's some tips that if you want to try to stand in the middle. Number one is admit you might be wrong. Right? Admit you might be wrong. You guys ever see the movie Liar, Liar? Right? He's trying to say the pen is red when it's really blue, and he's like, roo, 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 royal blue. Right? That's so many of us when we try to say the word wrong. I was Ask Natalie, it's the hardest thing that I say. I'm trying to get better, though. I'm trying to be honest. I'm trying to be open. And when I mess up, that I'm going to admit, hey, I was wrong. I was wrong. Admit you might be wrong. Heck, you may be right. You may have a biblical stance. But if you come in with an absolute mentality, you're wrong, even if you're right. If you have an absolute mentality that you're the only person who has this thought or has this thing that's absolutely right, you're wrong. So admit that you might be wrong. Admit you might be wrong. Another thing that we could do is that we need to always, always, always side with the victim or the person in need. Always side with the victim and person in need. Jesus best showed us this, and if we go to John chapter 8, and this is my last passage I'm going to read. John chapter 8, verse 3 through 11. And it says, the teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought a woman caught in adultery. They made her stand before the group and said to Jesus, Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery, and the law of Moses commanded us to stone such women. So what do you say? They were using this question as a trap. They were trying to get him in the middle, right? In order to have a basis of accusing him. But Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. And when they kept questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, Let any one of you who's without sin be the first to throw a stone at her. Again, he stooped down and wrote on the ground. At this, those who heard began to go away one at a time, the older ones first, until only Jesus was left. The woman still standing there, Jesus straightened up and asked her, Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you? No one, sir, she said. Then neither do I condemn you, Jesus declared. Go and leave your life of sin. Some of the translations say, go and sin no more. And so here's Jesus taking a stand in the middle. He's standing in between this woman caught in adultery And again, she was caught in adultery. It wasn't accused of adultery, so we don't know what kind of situation she was in. But she was thrown out there, really probably embarrassed, 100%. Thrown out there. Side note, where's the guy in this situation? We don't know, but in my mind, I hope he was in a similar situation. Caught in adultery, doing the same thing, right? But Jesus didn't pick a side. Jesus didn't pick a side. He didn't side with this woman and say, no, just forget about it. She's fine. Don't worry about it. Let's sweep it under the rug. He didn't side with her. But he didn't side with the Pharisees either. He didn't say, no, you're right. Let's do the law of Moses. I'll throw the first stone because guess what? I haven't sinned, right? So Jesus was the only one in that situation with the authority to throw a stone. But Jesus decided to take a stand in the middle. And so we really get this middle is when the last thing he says to this woman is, I don't condemn you, but go and sin no more. Go leave your life of sin. Jesus wasn't condoning adultery. He wasn't siding with her and saying, that's okay, that's fine, don't worry about it. But what he was saying was, I love you. You're the one in need. You're the one who's broken. And so I'm going to side with you. I'm going to be with you in the sense that I'm going to side with your brokenness, and I'm not going to condemn you. But guess what? I don't want you to stay broken, right? That's what Jesus doesn't want us to stay broken. He wants us to get better and to move on. So Jesus stood in the middle, and if you need another example, just go ahead and look at a crucifix, and you see Jesus standing in the middle between a thief, two thieves, and one who loved him and one who didn't love him, and Jesus stood in the middle there too. Jesus always stands in the middle. He's at the right hand of the Father right now, standing in the middle of the Father and us. Because guess what? Without Jesus, we're all going to hell. If no one's told you that recently, let me tell you, without Jesus, you are going to hell. But with Jesus, who's standing in the middle, interceding on our behalf, fighting for us, we get to go to heaven. We get to go to heaven. And so the thing that Jesus asks us to do is to take that same fight to this world. This world is broken. And so Jesus is fighting for us as believers. He's fighting on our side. But we need to fight for the non-believers. We need to fight for the world. And we need to stand in between them and hell and say, no one can get through hell through me. That's what Palm Coast should be like. That's what Life Coast should be like, is that it should be hard to get to hell through Life Coast Church, through Palm Coast. It should be hard to get to hell. That's my goal in life. I want to make it as hard as possible for anybody to get to hell. And that's our fight, and that's how we stand in the middle. Is we don't condemn the world. Our heart breaks for the world. And we say, we're going to stand in the middle between you and hell because we know what that looks like. And we've got going forward, and we want to take you with me. That needs to be our fight. That needs to be our battle. Our battle is not on gun control. Okay? It's not on which president you liked better. That is not our battle. Our battle is against death and hell. And that's the only fight we should take. And so, again, I follow a lot of you on Facebook, so I want to challenge you that I don't want to hear a lot of clanging cymbals or gongs, but I want to see a lot of love on Facebook and social media. I want to see a lot of that. So as I close, I'm going to ask everybody to stand to their feet, if you wouldn't mind. We're going to go into worship in just a second, but what I just want to challenge you guys with a couple things. Challenge you guys with a few things. Is that what I want you to do is as this worship song happens, when the band comes and plays, if you are harboring unforgiveness or bitterness and you know it, I want to encourage you to come to the front, put it on a Post-it, and stick it to the cross and give it to Jesus. If you've got bitterness, if you've got unforgiveness that you're holding on to, I want you to come up and stick it to the cross. Next thing is, if you don't know, I say it again, but if you don't know where your root of bitterness has come from, where that anger is coming from, you don't know why you feel this way, get help. Get help. Get some people that are around you. Go to CR. Go to Clarity Counseling. Pastor Josh and Tracy would love to help you. CR and the team would love to help you. Find out what that is. And then the last thing, it's going to be really hard, is this: if there's someone here or someone you know that you're harboring bitterness or unforgiveness toward or anger toward, I'm going to challenge you to seek reconciliation today. I don't want you to do this and say, oh, I'm going to do it this week. I want you to do it today. If there's someone in this room, I want you to go find them during this worship song. Be open and honest with them and say, I'm sorry, but I've been harboring this bitterness toward you. And I'm struggling with it, and God's helped me work through it, and I don't want to ask for forgiveness. Find that person, seek that person out, and do that today. So as we worship, I just want to encourage you, if you find any of those areas, again, come write it on the cross if you know what it is. If you don't know what it is, go seek out help. Go seek out Clarity Counseling or CR. And if there's someone in this room, or heck, even if it's someone out of state, you need to do it on social media, take that social media and use it for good and ask for forgiveness there. Do it. If you guys are harboring that, don't leave today holding on to that unforgiveness, to that bitterness. We'll also have prayer team members on either side of the stage. So if you guys need prayer, they'll have the red lanyards, and they love to pray with you. So, Father, I just thank you and praise you, God. I thank you that you're a good God who loves us. I thank you that you give us good things, God. And I thank you that you, Jesus, that you stand in the middle on our behalf, that you fight for us, that you intercede to the Father on our behalf, and that we get to go to heaven for no other reason but because of you. And Jesus, I pray for Life Coast Church. I pray for Palm Coast. I pray that we build a wall in front of the gates of hell, God, and that we will not let anybody cross, that it will be difficult to get through hell through Palm Coast. God, I pray for those here who are still holding on to bitterness or unforgiveness or anger. God, I pray they put it on the cross and they give it to you today. God, I pray that if they don't know what it is, they seek help. God, I pray that there's someone here that they need to do, that they need to ask for forgiveness, God, that they do it today. They seek reconciliation today. So, Jesus, we thank you and praise you, and we give you all the honor and all the glory in your Son's precious, precious name.